You've been lied to about where Earth's most terrifying predators lived. Every movie, every documentary, every museum exhibit has pointed you toward the wrong place. While you were obsessing over Montana and Argentina, the real Jurassic nightmare was unfolding somewhere completely unexpected. Picture creatures so massive they make Jurassic Park look like a petting zoo. Where was this prehistoric hellscape hiding? The location will blow your mind. Millions of years ago, Africa wasn't just another continent. It was home to monsters that make today's lions and elephants look like house cats. We're talking about creatures so massive, so terrifying, that they'd turn even the bravest safari guide into a quivering mess. The crown jewel of African prehistoric terror? Spinosaurus. This wasn't your typical movie monster. This was the real deal, and it was absolutely massive. At over 50 feet long and weighing up to 20 tons, Spinosaurus holds the title as the largest predatory dinosaur ever discovered. That distinctive sail on its back wasn't just for show either. Scientists think it helped regulate body temperature and possibly attracted mates. Hard to swipe right when you're that big, right? But here's where it gets really wild. Spinosaurus spent most of its time in water. Yeah, you heard that correctly, a crocodile-sized dinosaur that could swim and hunt in rivers. Its elongated snout packed with conical teeth was perfectly designed for catching fish. Massive fish, by the way. We're not talking about your weekend fishing trip catches here. North Africa during the Cretaceous period was nothing like the Sahara Desert we know today. Picture lush river deltas, sprawling floodplains, and tropical forests stretching as far as the eye could see. The climate was warm and humid, creating the perfect conditions for giants to thrive. Rivers crisscrossed the landscape like highways, and these waterways became hunting grounds for apex predators. Then there's Carcharodontosaurus, whose name literally means shark-toothed lizard. This beast made T-Rex look like a lightweight. At 45 feet long, it was actually larger than the famous Tyrannosaurus Rex that everyone obsesses over. Its skull alone measured over 5 feet long, packed with serrated teeth that could slice through bone like butter. The scary part? These weren't solitary hunters. Evidence suggests they might have worked together, which is a terrifying thought when each individual could tear apart most other dinosaurs single-handedly. What's fascinating is how these African giants evolved differently from their cousins on other continents. While North America had its T-Rex, Africa developed its own unique lineup of massive predators. The continent was like a prehistoric arms race where everything had to get bigger, stronger, and more lethal just to survive. The fossil evidence paints a picture of daily life that would make any nature documentary look tame. Imagine massive predators stalking through dense forests, their footsteps shaking the ground. Riverbanks became battlegrounds where giants clashed over territory and prey. The roar of a Carcharodontosaurus could probably be heard for miles across those ancient floodplains. And these weren't the only massive predators roaming around. Bahariosaurus, another North African giant, reached lengths of up to 40 feet. Its long, powerful legs suggest it was built for speed. A terrifying combination when you're dealing with something that massive. There's nothing quite like a 2-story tall predator that can outrun you. What makes these discoveries even more incredible is where we're finding them. The Sahara Desert, now one of the most barren places on Earth, keeps revealing fossils that tell stories of this lost world. Every expedition uncovers new pieces of the puzzle, showing us just how diverse and dangerous prehistoric Africa really was. The preservation of these fossils is remarkable too. Many specimens show incredible detail, right down to skin impressions and stomach contents. We can literally see what these giants ate for their last meals. Spoiler alert, it wasn't vegetables. But here's what really gets paleontologists excited: the sheer size of the hunting grounds these predators needed. A single Spinosaurus required enormous territories to find enough food. We're talking about areas spanning hundreds of square miles, all teeming with life. The ecosystem had to be incredibly rich to support multiple species of giant predators living in the same regions. The fossil beds of places like Egypt's Baharia Formation and Morocco's Kem group continue yielding new discoveries. Each dig season brings fresh evidence of just how massive and diverse Africa's prehistoric predators really were. Scientists estimate we've probably only scratched the surface of what's buried out there. These ancient African giants weren't just random evolutionary experiments either. They were perfectly adapted to their environments, representing millions of years of successful evolution. Their massive size, specialized hunting techniques, and unique anatomical features made them the undisputed rulers of their world. Well, the predators were just part of the story. The prey animals they hunted had to be equally impressive to sustain such massive carnivores. And when you learn about the plant eaters that shared these ancient landscapes, you'll understand why Africa needed such enormous predators in the first place. The Jurassic period rolled around like nature's ultimate construction project, and Africa decided to go absolutely massive. We're talking about a time when the continent became a breeding ground for creatures so enormous they make today's elephants look like house cats. Enter Paralitodon, a sauropod that basically broke the scales of what we thought was possible for land animals. This beast weighed over 80 tons. That's heavier than 12 African elephants combined. Its neck alone stretched longer than a school bus, and when it walked, the ground probably shook like a small earthquake was happening. But here's the wild part. Paralitodon wasn't even trying to be scary. It was a gentle giant, munching on prehistoric plants all day like a living, breathing mountain with a serious salad addiction. The name literally means tidal giant, which gives you a clue about where paleontologists found its bones. These creatures lived near ancient coastlines, wading through shallow waters and probably using their massive size to reach vegetation other dinosaurs could only dream about. Makes sense, right? When you're that big, you need a lot of food, and having a 30-foot neck is basically like having a built-in cherry picker. Then there's the predator situation, because every giant herbivore needs something equally terrifying hunting it. Carcharodontosaurus stepped up to fill that role with enthusiasm. This monster made T-Rex look modest. We're talking about a skull longer than a small car, packed with teeth designed to slice through bone like butter. The name means shark-toothed lizard, and honestly, that's probably the most accurate nickname in paleontology history. But wait, it gets weirder. Africa wasn't content with just having massive land predators. The continent also hosted Sarcosuchus, a crocodile so ridiculously oversized it makes modern crocs look like cute little pets. This thing reached 40 feet in length and weighed as much as a small whale. Picture a school bus with teeth and you're getting close. Sarcosuchus didn't just hang out in rivers either. It actively hunted dinosaurs that came too close to the water's edge. The fossil evidence from places like Morocco tells an incredible story. These weren't isolated giants stumbling around an empty landscape. This was a complete ecosystem of oversized creatures, all somehow managing to coexist in the same prehistoric neighborhoods. Rugops, whose name means wrinkle face, specialized in scavenging from kills made by larger predators. Smart strategy when your neighbors include 40-foot crocodiles and car-sized carnivorous dinosaurs. Deltadromeus brings another twist to this prehistoric party. This predator was built for speed rather than pure size. Though small is relative when we're talking about a 26-foot-long runner that could probably outpace most modern vehicles. It had long, powerful legs and a lightweight build, basically the cheetah of the Cretaceous period, except it weighed several tons and had a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth. Let's not forget the sheer abundance of these creatures. The Kem fossil beds in Morocco have yielded more giant predator species than anywhere else on Earth. Paleontologists joke that it's like nature decided to run an experiment. What happens if we put every possible giant carnivore in the same place and see who survives? The answer appears to be, somehow, they all did, at least for millions of years. Well, the environmental conditions explain a lot. The Cretaceous period gave Africa warm, humid climates with extensive river systems and lush vegetation. Oxygen levels were higher than today, which might have supported the massive metabolisms these giants required. The landscape was basically one enormous salad bar for herbivores, with enough meat walking around to keep every predator satisfied. And the weird part is how specialized these creatures became. While other continents had their own impressive dinosaurs, Africa seemed to develop its own unique flavor of prehistoric gigantism. These weren't just bigger versions of dinosaurs found elsewhere. They were entirely different species that evolved specifically to thrive in African conditions. The fossil record shows these creatures dominated their environments for tens of millions of years. They weren't evolutionary accidents or brief experiments. These were successful, well-adapted animals that ruled their world completely. The Jurassic and Cretaceous periods represented Africa's golden age of giants, when the continent hosted some of the most spectacular creatures ever to walk the earth. But even these massive land-dwelling titans weren't the only oversized residents of prehistoric Africa. The continent's ancient water systems held their own collection of monsters, creatures so bizarre and enormous they make today's river animals seem almost boring by comparison. While massive dinosaurs dominated Africa's land, something equally terrifying lurked beneath the surface of ancient rivers and lakes. These weren't your typical fish. We're talking about creatures so enormous they could swallow a small car whole. The prehistoric waters of Africa were basically a nightmare fuel factory. Take the ancient sawfish that once cruised the Nile region. These monsters stretched over 7 meters long. That's longer than a school bus. Their razor-sharp snouts were lined with teeth that could slice through just about anything unlucky enough to cross their path. But here's the crazy part. Regular sawfish today barely reach 3 meters. Makes you wonder what was in the water back then, right? Then there's the coelacanth situation. Everyone knows these living fossils still exist today, but their prehistoric African cousins were absolute units. Some fossil specimens show coelacanths the size of small boats cruising through ancient lakes. These armored fish had jaws powerful enough to crush turtle shells like potato chips. They were basically underwater tanks with attitude problems. Speaking of attitude problems, let's talk about the giant freshwater turtles that called prehistoric Africa home. These weren't the cute little pond turtles you might feed at the park. We're looking at shell-covered monsters with heads the size of trash cans and bite forces that could snap bones in half. Some species had shells over 2 meters wide. They basically turned every lake into a medieval fortress filled with living siege weapons. But wait, it gets weirder. Africa's ancient rivers hosted amphibians that would make modern crocodiles look like friendly pets. These armored beasts combined the worst features of frogs and tanks. Picture something with the jumping ability of a bullfrog, but the size and armor plating of a small building. They could leap out of the water without warning and grab prey twice their size. The competition for food in these water systems was absolutely brutal. Giant fish battled armored amphibians, while massive turtles fought prehistoric crocodiles for the best hunting spots. It was like an underwater cage match that lasted millions of years. The winners got to eat. The losers became someone else's dinner. Here's where things get really interesting, though. These aquatic monsters weren't just random, oversized animals. They were part of a complex ecosystem that pushed evolution into overdrive. Rivers and lakes created perfect evolutionary laboratories. Animals had to get bigger, stronger, and smarter just to survive another day. The fossil record shows us something fascinating about these water systems. They weren't just home to individual giant creatures, they supported entire communities of monsters. Fossil beds reveal layers upon layers of massive fish bones, turtle shells, and amphibian remains all mixed together. It's like finding the remains of an underwater city built entirely by giants. What's really mind-blowing is how these creatures adapted to their environments. Some developed specialized hunting techniques that would make modern predators jealous. Ancient African lungfish grew to massive sizes and developed the ability to survive in drought conditions by literally hibernating in mud cocoons. When the rains returned, these sleeping giants would wake up ready to dominate their territories all over again. The sheer diversity was staggering. Every major river system had its own collection of aquatic monsters. The Niger River hosted different species than the Congo, which had completely different giants than the ancient Nile systems. It was like each waterway was running its own experiment in creating the perfect underwater predator. And let's not forget the ambush specialists. Some of these aquatic giants perfected the art of surprise attacks. They'd lurk motionless in murky water for hours, waiting for unsuspecting land animals to come for a drink. When a massive dinosaur lowered its head to the water's edge, wham! Suddenly it's being dragged underwater by something even bigger and meaner. The fossil evidence suggests these water monsters were incredibly successful. Some species dominated African waterways for tens of millions of years. That's longer than humans have existed by a massive margin. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving and constantly evolving new ways to be absolutely terrifying. But here's the thing about prehistoric African waters: they weren't just hunting grounds for aquatic monsters. They were also highways for migration and evolution. As rivers changed course and lakes dried up or expanded, these water systems connected different regions and allowed species to spread across the continent. The legacy of these underwater terrors didn't just disappear when the dinosaurs went extinct. Their evolutionary innovations and ecological roles were inherited by new generations of creatures. The stage was perfectly set for the next chapter of African giants, and the dinosaur extinction event was about to create opportunities for entirely new types of monsters to take center stage. When the dinosaurs vanished 66 million years ago, Africa didn't just become empty. Nature abhors a vacuum, and boy did it fill that void with some absolutely wild creatures. The age of giant mammals and colossal birds had begun, and Africa was about to become home to animals so bizarre they'd make today's wildlife look ordinary. Think your local zoo's elephant is massive? Well, the ancient elephants of Africa would make modern ones look like house cats. Dinotherium stood nearly 16 feet tall and weighed around 15 tons. But here's the weird part. Its tusks curved downward from its lower jaw, making it look like some kind of prehistoric bulldozer. Scientists still argue about what those downward tusks were for. Digging? Stripping bark? Showing off to potential mates? Nobody knows for sure, but one thing's certain. You wouldn't want to bump into one during your morning jog. Then there's Madagascar, that island off Africa's coast that became evolution's personal laboratory. The elephant bird ruled this place like a feathered giant. Epyornis maximus stood 10 feet tall and weighed half a ton. That's heavier than a grand piano with legs. These weren't just big, they were ridiculously big. Their eggs alone weighed 18 pounds each. Makes sense, right? You'd need a massive egg to hatch a bird the size of a small dinosaur. But Madagascar's weirdness didn't stop there. The island hosted lemurs the size of gorillas. Archaeoindris was a 500-pound lemur that moved slowly through the trees like a massive, furry sloth. Picture those cute ring-tailed lemurs from the movies, then multiply their size by about 50. These gentle giants spent their days munching leaves and probably wondering why evolution made them so unnecessarily huge. Let's not forget Africa's water monsters got an upgrade too. Hippopotamus gorgiops made today's hippos look like bathtub toys. These ancient hippos stood 7 feet tall at the shoulder and had eyes positioned on tall stalks that stuck up from their heads like periscopes. Why the weird eye placement? They could stay almost completely submerged while keeping watch for predators or prey. Smart design, even if it looked absolutely ridiculous. The continent's bird situation was getting out of hand in the best possible way. Terror birds, yes, that's their actual scientific nickname, stalked across African plains like feathered nightmares. Kellincon stood 10 feet tall with a skull longer than a horse's head. These weren't gentle giants pecking at seeds. They were apex predators with beaks designed for crushing bones and tearing flesh. Basically, imagine an ostrich that hit the gym for 1,000,000 years and developed serious anger management issues. And the weird part is how these creatures filled exactly the same roles dinosaurs once played. Giant plant-eating mammals replaced long-necked sauropods. Massive predatory birds took over from T-Rex and its cousins. It's like nature was running the same software on completely different hardware. Some of these animals developed the strangest survival strategies. Arsinoitherium looked like a rhinoceros that got into a head-on collision with a bulldozer. This 5-ton mammal sported twin horns jutting from its nose that were hollow inside, probably for making loud honking sounds to communicate across the savanna. Imagine the noise a herd of these things would make. You'd hear them coming from miles away. The really mind-blowing part? Many of these giants survived way longer than you'd expect. While other continents lost their megafauna relatively quickly, Africa kept its giants around for millions of extra years. The continent's diverse habitats and stable climate created perfect conditions for oversized animals to thrive. But evolution wasn't done experimenting. Chalicotherium was perhaps the strangest mammal Africa ever produced. Picture a horse-sized animal that looked like someone mixed a gorilla with a ground sloth, then gave it massive claws instead of hooves. These bizarre creatures walked on their knuckles like apes and used their claws to pull down tree branches for food. They were basically prehistoric pandas, if pandas were the size of small cars and looked like they belonged in a horror movie. The diversity was staggering. Giant hyenas the size of lions prowled the landscape. Massive warthogs with tusks like swords rooted through ancient forests. Even the smaller animals were supersized. Rats the size of beavers scurried through the underbrush. What's fascinating is how these post-dinosaur giants set the stage for an even more incredible chapter in Africa's story. Because while these mammals and birds were busy being enormous, the climate was slowly changing. Ice ages were coming, and with them, a new wave of megafauna that would make these ancient giants look small. The stage was being set for Africa's most spectacular menagerie yet. The world was getting colder. Ice sheets stretched across northern continents like frozen blankets. But Africa was having its own prehistoric party. While woolly mammoths trudged through European snow, this continent hosted the most incredible gathering of giants the planet had ever seen. We're talking about the Pleistocene epoch, roughly 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago. The last ice age might have locked up water elsewhere, but Africa's megafauna were living their best lives. At least 30 species of massive mammals called this place home. These weren't your average big animals. They were evolutionary masterpieces that make today's African giants look almost cute. Take the ancient African buffalo, for instance. Modern Cape buffalo are already terrifying enough to make experienced hunters think twice. But their Ice Age ancestors? They stood nearly 7 feet tall at the shoulder and weighed as much as a small car. Their horns could span 12 feet across. Imagine trying to outrun that charging toward you across the savannah. Then, there were the giraffes that put modern ones to shame. Civatherium looked like someone crossed a giraffe with a moose and then pumped it full of steroids. This beast weighed over 2 tons and sported massive antler-like horns on its head. Standing next to a regular giraffe, it would have looked like the bouncer at Evolution's nightclub. But here's where things get really wild. Early humans were right there in the mix. Our ancestors weren't just watching from the sidelines like tourists on a safari. They were living, hunting, and competing with these prehistoric titans every single day. Archaeological sites across Africa tell stories of humans crafting spears specifically designed to take down megafauna. That takes some serious courage, or maybe just prehistoric desperation. The evidence is mind-blowing when you really dig into it. Cave paintings show humans hunting enormous elephants that dwarfed anything alive today. These ancient elephants had tusks so massive they could barely lift their heads. Some species had 4 tusks instead of 2, because apparently 2 enormous ivory spears weren't intimidating enough. Well, survival wasn't just about size back then. It was about adaptation, intelligence, and sometimes pure luck. Humans developed increasingly sophisticated hunting techniques, working in coordinated groups to bring down animals that could crush them with a single step. They learned to use fire, create pit traps, and craft weapons that could penetrate thick hides. And the weird part is how long Africa's megafauna actually survived compared to other continents. While North America lost most of its giants around 13,000 years ago, Africa's massive mammals hung on much longer. Some species only disappeared within the last few thousand years, practically yesterday in geological terms. Climate change was already putting pressure on these giants before humans really ramped up their hunting game. As the world warmed and ice sheets melted, habitats shifted dramatically. Grasslands turned to forests, rivers changed course, and food sources became unpredictable. Animals that had thrived for millions of years suddenly found themselves in a world they no longer recognized. Let's not forget the sheer diversity of what was wandering around back then. Giant baboons the size of gorillas swung through forests that no longer exist. Massive warthogs rooted through underbrush alongside horse-sized hyenas that could crack elephant bones with their jaws. There were even giant ostriches that made today's versions look like chickens. Some stood over 10 feet tall and could probably kick a hole through a tree trunk. The competition for resources must have been absolutely brutal. Imagine being an early human trying to find dinner while massive predators lurked around every corner. Lions were bigger, leopards were more numerous, and there were saber-toothed cats that specialized in taking down the largest prey available. Every day was essentially a prehistoric battle royale, but humans had something most of these giants didn't: adaptability and teamwork. While individual megafauna species were locked into specific ecological niches, humans could eat almost anything, live almost anywhere, and solve problems collectively. When the environment changed, they changed with it. When prey became scarce, they found new hunting strategies. The archaeological record shows this dramatic shift happening relatively quickly. Within a few thousand years, dozens of species that had dominated African landscapes for millions of years simply vanished. Some died out from climate pressures, others from human hunting, and many from a deadly combination of both factors working together. Yet Africa managed to keep more of its giants than anywhere else on Earth. The continent became a refuge for megafauna, preserving species that had relatives worldwide but survived only here. This wasn't an accident. It was the result of millions of years of coevolution between humans and large animals. Those survivors would become the foundation for something remarkable. The giants that made it through this prehistoric gauntlet didn't just disappear into history, they evolved into the incredible wildlife that still roams Africa today. Walk through any zoo or wildlife park today, and you'll notice something remarkable about Africa. This continent still hosts more massive animals than anywhere else on Earth. It's like stepping back in time, where giants roam freely across savannas and rivers. But here's what's fascinating. These aren't just random survivors. They're living links to an ancient world where being huge was the ultimate survival strategy. African elephants weighing up to 6 tons lumber across grasslands exactly like their prehistoric ancestors did millions of years ago. Well, not exactly the same ancestors. The ancient versions were even bigger. Today's elephants are basically the downsized models. Their family tree stretches back through countless generations of tusked giants, each one perfectly adapted to African landscapes that have remained surprisingly consistent over geological time. Then, there are the hippos. These 4-ton river monsters haven't changed their basic game plan in millions of years. They still spend their days lounging in muddy waters, emerging at night to munch on grass with the same methodical determination their Ice Age relatives showed. The only difference? Their prehistoric cousins were often twice as large and spread across rivers that no longer exist. Crocodiles present the most mind-blowing example of living prehistory. The Nile crocodiles gliding through African rivers today are nearly identical to species that hunted alongside dinosaurs. Makes sense, right? When you've perfected the art of being an apex aquatic predator, why mess with success? These scaled survivors represent an unbroken chain stretching back over 200 million years. Some individual crocodiles alive today might be over a century old, making them personal witnesses to changes most of us can barely comprehend. African rivers still hide giants that would make their prehistoric ancestors proud. The Nile perch can grow to over 400 pounds, while lungfish, actual living fossils, continue breathing air and surviving droughts using the exact same techniques their ancient relatives developed. Goliath frogs, weighing as much as newborn babies, hop around West African streams like miniature versions of the giant amphibians that once dominated these waterways. But why does Africa still have so many large animals when other continents lost theirs? The answer lies in a unique evolutionary partnership. African animals and early humans evolved together over millions of years. This meant megafauna had time to develop wariness around human hunters, unlike the naive giants of Australia or the Americas who encountered humans suddenly and catastrophically. Climate played a crucial role too. Africa's diverse landscapes, from dense rainforests to open savannas, provided countless refuges when ice ages and droughts struck other regions. Animals could migrate between different habitats instead of facing total extinction. The continent's position straddling the equator meant it avoided the most extreme temperature swings that wiped out giants elsewhere. Let's not forget the behavioral adaptations. African animals learned to live alongside increasingly sophisticated human societies. Elephants developed complex social structures and migration routes that avoided human settlements. Buffalo learned to move in massive herds that were difficult for early hunters to tackle completely. These survival strategies, passed down through generations, kept megafauna populations viable. And the weird part is how much modern Africa resembles what paleontologists imagine prehistoric landscapes looked like everywhere else. Watching a pride of lions coordinate to bring down a buffalo provides a window into Pleistocene hunting strategies. Seeing massive elephant herds migrate across the Serengeti mirror scenes that once played out across North American grasslands filled with mammoths and giant bison. Even Africa's plant life connects to this prehistoric continuity. Acacia trees evolved specifically to survive megafauna browsing, developing thorns and chemical defenses against hungry giants. Baobab trees, with their enormous trunks storing thousands of gallons of water, represent an evolutionary response to large animals needing reliable water sources during dry seasons. The continent's national parks and reserves function like time machines, preserving ecosystems that showcase how human megafauna relationships might have developed elsewhere under different circumstances. Visiting places like Kruger or the Masai Mara offers glimpses of a world where humans and giants still coexist, however precariously. Modern conservation efforts face the same challenges that led to prehistoric extinctions elsewhere. Growing human populations, habitat fragmentation, and climate change threaten to break this ancient continuity. The difference now is our awareness of what's at stake. We understand that Africa's surviving giants represent something irreplaceable, a living museum of evolutionary relationships that took millions of years to develop. Yet these magnificent survivors face an uncertain future. Their prehistoric ancestors survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and dramatic climate shifts. Today's challenges might prove more difficult to overcome. The giants that once ruled continents worldwide now make their final stand primarily in Africa, carrying the genetic and behavioral wisdom of ages past into an increasingly crowded modern world. This living connection to prehistory makes Africa's wildlife crisis more urgent than most people realize.